am Melissa Thompson, 32, and I never expected to become the villain at my own sister's wedding. But when I discovered my place card on a lonely table in the hallway, outside the beautifully decorated reception hall where everyone else was celebrating, something inside me broke. After years of being the family afterthought, this public humiliation was my breaking point. I collected my purse, left my carefully wrapped gift on the present table, and walked out without saying a word. I had no idea my quiet exit would unleash a storm that would forever change our family. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments. Hit that like button if you've ever felt underappreciated by family, and subscribe for more true stories about standing up for yourself. Now let's get into how one wedding seating chart exposed decades of family secrets. To understand why a seating arrangement hit me so hard, you need to know about my relationship with Amber, my younger sister by 4 years. Growing up, Amber was always the golden child in our family. She had this natural charm that made everyone adore her, while I was the responsible, studious one who never quite measured up in our parents' eyes. My mother, Catherine, would rush to attend all of Amber's dance recitals but conveniently had scheduling conflicts when it came to my debate competitions. My father, Richard, who runs a successful financial consulting firm, would proudly introduce Amber to his colleagues but rarely mentioned my achievements, even after I graduated with honors from Wharton and became a senior financial analyst at a prestigious firm. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood. When Amber barely passed high school, my parents threw her a lavish party. When I received a full scholarship to my dream college, I got a card in the mail 3 days later. This pattern continued into adulthood. Last year, Amber landed a job at our father's company despite having no qualifications. When she struggled, I spent countless nights helping her prepare presentations and explaining basic concepts. During a critical board meeting, she presented my financial strategy as her own. The board was impressed, my father beamed with pride, and Amber received a promotion. I wasn't even thanked. When Amber got engaged to Brian Miller, a successful attorney from a wealthy family, my parents were ecstatic. The wedding planning began immediately, and despite our strained relationship, Amber asked me to be her maid of honor. I was surprised but touched by the gesture. Maybe things were finally changing. For 6 months, I helped with every aspect of the wedding. I coordinated with vendors, organized the bridal shower, and even helped design the invitations. I poured my heart into writing a maid of honor speech that was both funny and touching. I wanted to prove I could rise above our past. 2 weeks before the wedding, Amber called me. "So, there's been a slight change," she said casually. "My college roommate Jessica is back from Europe, and I really want her to be my maid of honor instead. You understand, right? You'll still be a bridesmaid." I swallowed my hurt. "Sure, Amber. Whatever makes your day special." My mother called the next day. "Melissa, please don't make a fuss about the maid of honor thing. This day isn't about you. Can't you just get along for once?" For once. As if I had been the difficult one all these years. Despite everything, I bought an expensive bridesmaid dress, arranged for a professional hair and makeup appointment, and purchased a generous wedding gift, a weekend at the luxury resort where Amber and Brian had their first date. It cost nearly 2 weeks of my salary, but I wanted to prove I could be the bigger person. The night before the wedding, at the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Amber talking to her bridesmaids. God, you should have seen what Melissa wanted to wear originally. It was a disaster. I had to pretend the color didn't work with the theme. She laughed. Some people just don't understand style. I had actually loved that dress, but Amber insisted I choose something else. I told myself it didn't matter. Tomorrow was her day, and I would play my part with grace. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunny with a light breeze. Exactly what Amber had hoped for. I woke up early, determined to make this a positive day despite the knot in my stomach. I spent extra time getting ready, wanting to look my best for the family photos, and carefully wrapped the resort gift certificate in silver paper with a handwritten note expressing my genuine hopes for their happiness. I arrived at the church an hour early as requested, gift in hand, ready to help with any last-minute details. The church looked stunning, decorated with cascading white orchids and blush roses arrangements I had helped select. As I walked toward the bridal suite, I could hear laughter. I paused outside when I heard my name. "Can you believe Melissa's shoes?" Amber was saying. "So practical. It's like she's going to an office meeting. Not my wedding. At least she'll be comfortable standing in the back row for photos." Someone replied, followed by more laughter. My cheeks burned. I'd spent hours finding these shoes, specifically choosing something that matched her wedding colors. I took a deep breath and knocked before entering, pretending I hadn't heard a thing. "Hey everyone. The flowers look amazing." The bridesmaids exchanged glances. Amber barely looked up. "You're late. Everyone else has been here for ages." I checked my watch. The email said 10. It's 9:50. Whatever. "Can you help the flower girl with her basket?" Her ribbon came loose. I spent the next hour helping everywhere except near Amber. The photographer arrived, and we began taking pre-ceremony photos. In every group shot, I was positioned at the far edge, easily croppable. For most of the bride and bridesmaids' photos, I was asked to hold items or fix Amber's train rather than be in the pictures. During this time, I met Brian, Amber's fiancé, who seemed genuinely kind. He made a point of thanking me for all my help with the wedding planning. "Amber told me you've been instrumental in making this day happen," he said warmly. I was surprised Amber had acknowledged my contributions to anyone. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I stood at the end of the line of bridesmaids, watching my sister marry a man who seemed to truly love her. During their vows, I caught my mother wiping away tears, my father standing proudly beside her. I felt a familiar pang, wondering if they would ever look that proud at any moment in my life. After the ceremony, we all headed to the Grand Plaza Hotel for the reception. The ballroom was breathtaking crystal chandeliers, centerpieces with floating candles, and a dance floor that sparkled under the lights. I had helped select this venue, negotiating a significant discount because I knew the event manager. As guests began to arrive, I looked for the seating chart to find my table. I assumed I'd be seated with family, or perhaps the other bridesmaids. I scanned the elegant chart once, twice, and then a third time. My name wasn't listed. "Excuse me." I approached the wedding planner, Sarah. "I can't seem to find my name on the seating chart." Sarah looked uncomfortable. "Oh, let me check something." She flipped through her clipboard and then gestured for me to follow her. We walked through the main ballroom, past the family tables near the head table, past the friend tables in the middle section, and toward the exit. Just outside the ballroom doors, in the hallway that led to the restrooms, sat a small table with a single place card. "Melissa Thompson." "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice barely audible. Sarah couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry." This was specifically requested by the bride. I stood frozen, staring at the lonely table. From where I stood, I could barely see into the ballroom. I wouldn't be able to hear the toasts or see the first dance. A waiter passing by gave me a sympathetic look. I walked back into the ballroom on shaky legs, looking for my mother. I found her arranging her gift on the present table. "Mom, did you know I'm seated in the hallway?" "By myself." She glanced around nervously. "Oh, Melissa, I'm sure it's just a mix-up with the table numbers." The wedding planner said it was specifically requested by Amber. My mother sighed. "Well, you know space is limited, and they had to make some adjustments at the last minute. It's not a big deal, honey. Please don't make a scene. This is your sister's special day." I turned to look for my father, but he was busy networking with Brian's family, laughing and exchanging business cards. He wouldn't meet my eyes when I tried to get his attention. As guests began taking their seats for dinner, I stood near my hallway table, feeling increasingly invisible. The final blow came during Amber's welcome speech. "Brian and I are so grateful to have everyone who truly matters to us here today," she said, raising her glass. Her eyes scanned the room, deliberately skipping over the hallway where I stood. "Family means everything to us. and were blessed with the best. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Years of being overlooked, dismissed, and diminished crystallized into a sudden clarity. I deserved better than this. Without a word, I walked to the gift table, took back my present, and scribbled a brief note. Congratulations. I hope you have the day you deserve. Melissa. I placed the note where my gift had been, walked calmly to the coat check, collected my things and left. No drama, no confrontation, no goodbye. I simply removed myself from a situation where I was clearly unwanted. As I walked through the hotel lobby, I could feel a few curious eyes on me, including those of a cousin who had seen me leave. I didn't turn back. In my car, I finally let the tears come. Then I did something I'd never done before with my family. I turned off my phone completely. Whatever fallout was coming would have to wait until I was ready to face it. The walk from that hallway table to my car was the longest and shortest journey of my life. Every step felt heavy with 3 decades of accumulated hurt, yet powered by a strange new energy, the unfamiliar fuel of self-respect. As I passed through the elegant lobby, my cousin Rachel caught up with me. Melissa, where are you going? They're about to serve dinner. I couldn't manufacture a fake smile anymore. I'm seated alone in the hallway, Rachel. I can't do this anymore. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock. Wait, what? That can't be right. Go see for yourself. Table 23, if you can call it a table. My voice cracked slightly. Rachel touched my arm. Let me talk to Aunt Catherine. This has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake. The wedding planner confirmed Amber requested it specifically. I pulled away gently. I've spent my whole life being treated like an afterthought by this family. I'm done. But it's her wedding day. Exactly. And she still found time to humiliate me one more time. I straightened my shoulders. Tell them whatever you want. Or don't. I doubt they'll notice I'm gone until the check for my share of the wedding expenses doesn't arrive. I continued walking, Rachel's concerned face fading behind me. Near the exit, I nearly collided with my mother, who was returning from the restroom. Melissa? Where are you going? Her eyes narrowed with suspicion rather than concern. Home, Mom. I'm going home. What? You can't leave now. Your sister will be devastated. The irony of that statement almost made me laugh. Mom. I'm literally seated alone in the hallway. Amber made sure I wouldn't be part of this celebration. She had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before defaulting to her usual position. You're overreacting. It's just a seating arrangement. Why do you always have to make everything about you? Those words, so familiar they were practically a family motto where I was concerned finally lost their power over me. That's the thing, Mom. Nothing has ever been about me. Not once. And that's okay. But I won't sit alone in a hallway pretending it doesn't hurt anymore. Please, your father is making important connections with Brian's family. Don't embarrass us. There it was. Not don't go because we love you or don't go because we want you here. Don't go because it might embarrass them. Goodbye, Mom. Congratulate Amber for me. I walked around her and through the revolving door into the warm evening air. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for several minutes, waiting for anyone from my family to come after me. No one did. My father was likely still networking, unaware I was leaving. My mother had probably rejoined the reception, already crafting a story about my absence. I reached for my purse and found the small speech I had written for Amber when I thought I would be her maid of honor. Despite everything, there was love in those words. I considered leaving it but ultimately tucked it back in my purse. Some things, once taken away, couldn't be given again. I started my car and made the 40-minute drive to my apartment in silence. No radio, no phone calls, just the sound of my own breathing gradually becoming steadier. By the time I parked in my usual spot, a strange calmness had settled over me. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired in a bone-deep way that had nothing to do with physical exhaustion. In my apartment, I carefully hung up my expensive dress, removed my makeup, and put on comfortable clothes. I made a cup of tea and sat by my window, watching the sky turn from dusk to darkness. For the first time in years, maybe ever, I wasn't thinking about what my family needed from me, or how I could earn their approval. I turned off my phone completely, unplugged my landline, and decided to give myself one night of peace before dealing with the aftermath of my decision. Whatever storm was brewing at the wedding reception would still be there tomorrow. Tonight was for me. As I drifted off to sleep, I had no idea that across town, my quiet exit had just detonated a family bomb that had been ticking for decades. I woke the next morning feeling lighter somehow, despite knowing I would have to face the consequences of my actions. When I finally turned on my phone at 1:00 a.m., it immediately began buzzing with notifications: 27 missed calls, 43 text messages, and 15 voicemails. Most were from family members, but surprisingly, none were from my parents or Amber. As I scrolled through the texts, confusion replaced my expectation of angry recriminations. The messages ranged from, "Are you okay?" to "Can't believe what went down last night," to "Call me as soon as possible, this is insane." Before I could make sense of any of it, my phone rang. It was my cousin Rachel. "Thank God you answered," she said when I picked up. "Where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm at home." "Why wouldn't I be okay?" "You haven't heard." It wasn't a question. "Heard what?" "I turned my phone off last night." Rachel took a deep breath. "After you left, all hell broke loose. I don't even know where to start." My stomach tightened. "Just tell me what happened." "When I went back inside after talking to you, I checked out that hallway table. I couldn't believe Amber would do that. I mentioned it to my mom, your Aunt Patricia, who was furious on your behalf. She confronted your mom about it during the salad course. I closed my eyes. Oh no. Oh yes. Your mom tried to brush it off as just a mix-up, but my mom wasn't having it. Then Brian, who apparently had no idea what was going on, asked where you were. When someone told him you'd been seated in the hallway and left, he looked shocked. I sat down on my couch, trying to process this information. Rachel continued. Brian turned to Amber and asked if it was true. She kind of laughed it off, saying, "You were being dramatic as usual." That's when things got really wild. Brian stood up and said, "You told me you and your sister were close. You told me she chose not to be in the wedding party. Then he asked your dad if he knew you were supposed to sit in the hallway." My breath caught. What did Dad say? He seemed genuinely confused, Melissa. I don't think he knew. Brian then said something like, "I've been hearing about how difficult and jealous Melissa is for months, but everything I've seen shows the opposite." Then he told everyone how you helped plan the entire wedding and how you negotiated with vendors to save them money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Brian said all this? During their wedding reception, he was furious, Mel. He said he'd been hearing stories about you from Amber and your mom that didn't add up, and now he was seeing the truth. He said he wouldn't start his marriage with this kind of deceit. What happened then? Amber started crying, claiming Brian was ruining everything. Your mom tried to shut the whole thing down, but then Brian's mother got involved. Apparently, she pulled your mom aside earlier and asked why you were seated in the hallway, and your mom told her you had behavioral issues and couldn't be trusted in social situations. Brian's mom was horrified when she heard that. I felt sick. She said I have behavioral issues. It gets worse, Rachel said. Brian's dad asked what kind of family treats their daughter this way. Then your dad finally spoke up, asking what everyone was talking about. He seemed genuinely in the dark about the seating arrangement. Of course he was, I said bitterly. Dad never notices anything unless it affects business. Well, he noticed this. When he realized what had happened, he looked broken. Mel, I've never seen Uncle Richard look like that. He asked Amber if it was true, and she just kept saying it wasn't a big deal, and everyone was overreacting. So, what happened to the reception? I asked, still struggling to picture this scene unfolding. It basically fell apart. Brian and Amber had a huge argument in front of everyone. He said he felt like he didn't even know who had married. Half the guests left within the hour, including most of Brian's family. Your parents were arguing. Amber was crying hysterically. It was chaos. I sat in stunned silence. Rachel's voice softened. Mel, I've watched how they treat you for years and said nothing. I'm sorry for that. But you should know, a lot of the family is on your side. This wasn't just about a seating arrangement. It exposed something ugly that's been going on for too long. After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes. This was not the aftermath I had expected. I had imagined angry calls from my parents, not this complete implosion of the wedding. My phone rang again. This time it was my Aunt Rebecca, my father's sister who lived across the country and rarely involved herself in family drama. "Melissa," she said when I answered. "I've just heard what happened at the wedding. I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." Over the next hour, Aunt Rebecca revealed how my mother had always been threatened by my close relationship with my father when I was very young. Apparently, I was a daddy's girl until around age 5, when suddenly my mother began orchestrating situations to make me appear difficult, reinforcing to my father that I was jealous and problematic while positioning Amber as the easy child. Over time, this narrative became our family reality. Your father was building his business back then, working constantly. He didn't see what was happening, and I was too far away to intervene effectively. By the time I realized how systematic it was, the damage was done, she said regretfully. As I tried to process this revelation, my phone beeped with an incoming text. It was from Brian. "Melissa, I owe you an apology. I had no idea about any of this. I need to talk to you when you're ready." Before I could respond, another call came in from my boss, Jonathan. With a sense of dread, I answered. "Melissa, I received a strange call from your sister this morning," he said without preamble. "She was quite upset, claiming you had stolen some confidential documents from your family business and might try to use company resources to cause problems. Is there something going on I should know about?" My hand tightened around the phone. "She called my workplace?" "That's completely false, Jonathan. I haven't taken anything from the family business." "I figured as much," he said, sounding relieved. "It was an odd call. Is everything okay?" I gave him a heavily edited version of events, and he was understanding but concerned. "Take Monday off if you need to sort this out," he offered. "And Melissa, if anyone else from your family calls with these kinds of accusations, I'll direct them to legal." By early afternoon, it was clear that the wedding fallout had spread far beyond the reception hall. My cousin Jessica called to inform me that Amber had posted a vague but clearly targeted social media rant about toxic family members who ruin special occasions. The post was flooded with comments from wedding guests, setting the record straight. As evening approached, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway. The moment of reckoning had arrived. I opened the door but stood firmly in the doorway, not inviting them in. My mother looked like she'd been crying, her makeup smudged and her typically perfect hair disheveled. My father stood slightly behind her, his face drawn and gray. "Can we come in?" my mother asked, her voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I hesitated before stepping aside. "You have 15 minutes. They entered my apartment, my mother looking around with the critical eye I'd grown accustomed to. My father seemed distracted, taking in the framed financial certifications on my wall as if seeing them for the first time. "You've made quite a spectacle," my mother began, sinking onto my couch. "Amber is devastated." "Catherine," my father warned, shaking his head slightly. I remained standing. I made a spectacle? I quietly left a wedding where I was literally seated in the hallway like an unwanted service dog. If there was a spectacle, it wasn't of my making. It was just a seating misunderstanding, my mother insisted. There wasn't enough room at the family tables. Sarah, the wedding planner, told me Amber specifically requested I sit there. My voice was steady. "This wasn't a mistake." My father turned to my mother. "Is that true, Catherine?" My mother's eyes darted between us. "Well, There were complications with the seating arrangements. The venue changed some things at the last minute." "That's not true," I said quietly. "I helped book that venue. Their table arrangements were confirmed weeks ago." My father sank into an armchair, looking suddenly older. Why would Amber want her sister seated in the hallway? It doesn't make sense. Because she's always been jealous of Melissa. My mother snapped, then immediately covered her mouth, as if she could take the words back. My father and I stared at her in shock. Jealous, I finally managed. Amber has been your favorite since we were children. What could she possibly be jealous of? My mother's face crumpled. Your father. He adored you when you were little. You were his first child, his little financial prodigy. Amber could never compete with that. My father looked confused. Catherine, what are you talking about? You're the one who always told me Melissa was difficult and didn't want my attention. A heavy silence filled the room as years of manipulation began to unravel. Is that why you always undermined me? I asked my mother, pieces falling into place. Because Dad liked me first. You don't understand what it was like, she said defensively. Richard was building his business, always working. When he was home, all he wanted was to teach you numbers and business concepts. A 4-year-old? Amber couldn't compete with that. I had to protect her. By turning Dad against me. My voice cracked. By making me the family scapegoat for 30 years. My father stood up suddenly. That's enough. Catherine, is this true? Have you been turning me against our daughter all these years? My mother's silence was answer enough. He turned to me, his eyes filled with a dawning horror. Melissa, I had no idea. All these years, your mother told me you were struggling with jealousy, that you resented Amber's social success, that you didn't want to be included in family events. She said you needed space, that pushing you would only make things worse. And you believed her. I said, not a question but a statement of fact. You never once asked me directly. He seemed to deflate. No, I didn't. I was so focused on the business, on providing financially. I thought your mother was handling the emotional side of parenting. I failed you. As this painful truth settled in the room, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Patricia, Rachel's mother. Melissa, are your parents with you? They're not answering their phones. Yes, they're here. Tell your father he needs to get to the office immediately. Amber is there, and she's removing files from the secure server. Brian just called to warn us they had a huge fight, and she told him she's going to take what's rightfully hers before anyone can stop her. I relayed the message to my father, whose face turned from ashen to red. What files? I asked. The proprietary investment algorithms, he said, already moving toward the door. The ones you helped develop last year when you were consulting for us. They're worth millions. My mother looked panicked. Richard, Amber wouldn't do that. She's upset. That's all. Like she wouldn't seat her sister in the hallway at her wedding, he retorted, an edge to his voice I'd never heard before. I need to go. I'm coming with you, I said, grabbing my keys. To my surprise, he didn't object. As we headed for the door, my mother called after us. This is all being blown out of proportion. If everyone would just calm down. My father turned back. Catherine, for once, just stop. Our family is falling apart, and it seems you've been the architect of much of this disaster. Stay here or go home, but I suggest you do some serious reflection either way. We left her standing in my living room, her carefully constructed family narrative crumbling around her. In the car, my father was uncharacteristically quiet before finally speaking. I've been a fool, Melissa. A blind, absent fool. I didn't disagree. All those achievements of yours on the wall, I didn't even know about half of them. You weren't supposed to, I said simply. Mom made sure of that. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. When this is sorted, we have a lot to discuss. But right now, we need to stop your sister from destroying the company. As we drove, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was from Brian. I've left the house. I can't be part of this family until some serious changes happen. Melissa, I'm truly sorry for my role in all this. You deserved better. When we arrived at the office building, several lights were on despite it being Sunday evening. My father's assistant, Lloyd, was waiting anxiously in the lobby. Mr. Thompson, thank goodness. Amber's upstairs with someone from IT. She's claiming you authorized her to transfer some proprietary files. My father's face darkened. I did no such thing. Call security. As the elevator doors closed, my father turned to me. Melissa, I may need your help. You understand these systems better than I do. It was the first time in my adult life he had acknowledged my expertise. I nodded, pushing down the complicated emotions that threatened to overwhelm me. Right now, we had a company to save the family crisis would have to wait its turn. The elevator doors opened to reveal the executive floor of Thomson Financial Advisors in disarray. Several employees had come in on a Sunday after receiving alarming calls, and they stood in clusters, whispering anxiously. They fell silent when they saw my father and me step out together. My father's longtime secretary, Martha, rushed over. Richard, thank goodness. Amber's in the secure server room with Ethan from IT. She showed him an email authorization from you. It's forged. My father said grimly. Where's Lloyd with security? On their way up. Martha looked at me with surprise. Melissa, I didn't expect to see you here. She's here because we need her, my father replied before I could speak. Melissa helped design the security protocols for these systems. This was news to Martha, whose eyebrows shot up. My contribution to the company's cybersecurity had apparently been another well-kept secret. We hurried toward the server room at the end of the hall. Through the glass wall, I could see Amber gesturing animatedly to a nervous-looking IT specialist who was typing at a terminal. My father pushed open the door. Amber, stop this immediately. My sister whirled around, her face blotchy from crying, still wearing her wedding reception outfit from the night before. Dad, thank God. Tell them I have authorization to transfer these files. You don't have any such authorization, my father said firmly. Ethan, step away from that terminal now. The IT specialist looked relieved as he quickly backed away from the computer. Amber's expression transformed from desperate pleading to rage when she noticed me standing behind our father. What is she doing here? Haven't you done enough damage, Melissa? You ruined my wedding, and now you're trying to turn Dad against me too. Amber, that's enough, my father said. What do you think you're doing with those files? Taking what belongs to me. What belongs to this family before she tries to steal it? Amber jabbed a finger in my direction. She's always been jealous of me, always trying to undermine me. Now she's convinced Brian Im's some kind of monster, and he's threatening to annul our marriage after one day. The only person undermining anyone is you, I said calmly, despite my racing heart. Those algorithms you're trying to steal? I developed them. They're under patent pending in my name, not yours. Amber's face paled. That's a lie. I presented that work to the board. Yes, you did. I acknowledged. After I spent 3 months developing it and teaching you how it worked. But the actual patent application has my name on it. Dad insisted on that at least. My father nodded. It's true, Amber. Melissa is the legal owner of that intellectual property. She licensed it to the company at a fraction of its market value as a favor to the family. Amber looked between us, her expression becoming more desperate. But I need those files. I have debts you don't know about. What kind of debts? My father asked, his voice softening with concern. She looked down, her shoulders slumping. Gambling debts. About $800,000. My father staggered back as if physically struck. 800 Amber. How is that possible? It started small, just poker nights with friends from college, then online betting. I always thought I could win it back with one good streak. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. These people I owe money to, they're not nice, Dad. They've been threatening me. I need those files, they're worth millions. I was going to sell them to a competitor. The security team arrived then, led by Lloyd, but my father waved them back. Give us a moment. He turned to Amber, his expression torn between disappointment and paternal concern. Why didn't you come to me? Because you would have been disappointed in me, she cried. Because I'm not perfect like Melissa with her fancy degrees and financial genius. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Perfect? Amber, you've been the golden child our entire lives. That's what you think, she shot back. Everything comes so easily to you. Every time I tried to compete, I couldn't measure up. Do you know what it's like living in the shadow of someone who never makes mistakes? Mom was the only one who ever made me feel special. A heavy silence fell over the room as the depth of my mother's manipulations became clear. She had positioned each of us as the victim of the other, ensuring we remained divided and dependent on her for emotional support and validation. Amber, my father finally said, selling company property is not the answer. That's corporate espionage, it's illegal. You could go to prison. Then what am I supposed to do? She wailed. These people are dangerous. My father straightened his shoulders. Well, handle it. But first, you need to step away from those computers and come to my office. This ends now. As Amber reluctantly followed our father, I stayed behind to work with Ethan on securing the files and checking what might have already been compromised. The algorithms were safe, but Amber had downloaded client lists and investment strategies' valuable information in the wrong hands. An hour later, I joined them in my father's office, where the situation had escalated further. Brian was there, looking exhausted and grim, along with the company's legal counsel. Melissa, come in, my father said. We've been discussing options. Options for what? I asked. For saving your sister from criminal charges and protecting the company, he replied heavily. The debt situation is even worse than she initially admitted. And there's evidence she's been embezzling from client accounts to cover her gambling losses. I sank into a chair. How much? Nearly $2 million in total, the lawyer said grimly. Brian looked at me with haunted eyes. I had no idea. Melissa, we've only been dating for a year. She kept her finances completely separate. Did Mom know? I asked, already suspecting the answer. My father nodded. She's been helping Amber cover it up, using her access to the company accounts. That's why she was so insistent on having Amber work directly with the high-net-worth clients to maintain access and control. The magnitude of the betrayal was staggering. This went beyond family dysfunction into criminal territory. What happens now? I asked. We have two choices, my father said. Report everything to the authorities, which would mean criminal charges for Amber and possibly your mother. Or find a way to handle this internally, make the clients whole, and implement safeguards to ensure it never happens again. All eyes turned to me. Why are you all looking at me? I asked. Because, my father said slowly, you're the only one with the financial expertise to untangle this mess. And because, despite everything they've done to you, you're still legally family. Your sister's fate is, at least partially, in your hands. The irony was almost too much. After decades of being marginalized and dismissed by my family, they were now turning to me for salvation. Part of me wanted to walk away and let them face the consequences of their actions. But another part, a part I wasn't entirely proud of, recognized the opportunity here. If I help, I said carefully, things need to change. Permanently. I won't be the family savior who's conveniently forgotten again when the crisis passes. My father nodded solemnly. I understand. What are your terms? As I outlined my conditions, full disclosure of all family and company finances, a formal role on the company board, mandatory therapy for Amber and our parents, and more, I could see the future of our family business and relationships reshaping before my eyes. All because I refused to sit alone at a table in the hallway. Brian, who had been quiet during my negotiations, finally spoke. For what it's worth, Melissa, I think you're being more generous than most people would be in your position. I'm not doing it for them, I admitted. I'm doing it for the clients who trusted our family with their financial futures, and for the employees who depend on this company for their livelihoods. As we hammered out the details of what would become known internally as the restructuring, one thing became crystal clear. The wedding seating chart that was meant to diminish me had instead revealed my true value, not just to the family business, but to the concept of family itself. 3 days after the wedding disaster, we gathered at the family home for what my father had somberly termed a reckoning. Present were my parents, Amber, Brian, who had agreed to attend despite having moved to a hotel, myself, and surprisingly, Aunt Rebecca, who had flown in from California at my father's request. The grand dining room where we sat had hosted countless family dinners where Id felt invisible. Now, all eyes were on me as I spread financial documents across the polished mahogany table. Before we begin, I said, I want to make it clear that this meeting has two purposes. First, to address the financial crisis Amber's actions have created. Second, to confront the family dynamics that allowed this situation to develop in the first place. Both are equally important. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since the wedding, bristled visibly. I don't see why we need to dredge up ancient history. The financial issues are what matter now. They're connected, Catherine, my father said firmly. We can't fix one without addressing the other. Amber sat with her arms crossed, eyes red-rimmed but defiant. Can we just get on with it? I've admitted what I did. Actually, you haven't. I corrected her. You've admitted to gambling debts and attempting to steal intellectual property. But according to these records, you've been systematically diverting client funds for nearly 2 years and falsifying reports to cover it up. That goes well beyond a gambling problem. Brian looked ill as I outlined the extent of the deception. When I finished, he turned to Amber. Did you ever actually love me, or was I just a convenient cover for all this? A respectable front for the family business. Amber's facade finally cracked. Of course I loved you. I still love you. I got in so deep so fast. Every time I tried to stop, I'd lose more, and the hole got bigger. But why not ask for help? My father pressed. I built this company from nothing. I would have helped you. Would you? Amber's voice turned bitter. The mighty Richard Thompson, helping his screw-up daughter? You've always measured everything by success. I couldn't bear to have you look at me the way you look at her. She jerked her head toward me. What way is that? My father asked, genuinely confused. Like she's the only one who matters. Like she's the only one who understands your precious business. Amber's voice rose hysterically. Aunt Rebecca interjected gently. Amber, your father doesn't look at Melissa that way. In fact, until very recently, he's barely acknowledged her accomplishments at all. That's not true, Amber insisted. Mom always said, your mother has been playing you both against each other since you were children, Aunt Rebecca said firmly. Richard, show them the emails. My father hesitantly slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed emails between my mother and various family members, including my father, spanning more than 2 decades. Reading them, I felt physically ill. They documented a systematic campaign by my mother to isolate me from my father and position Amber as the daughter who truly needed and deserved attention. There were emails to my father, claiming I had refused to attend his business dinners when in fact I'd never been told about them. Emails to relatives suggesting I was struggling emotionally, and it was better not to mention certain topics around me. Emails to my college advisors expressing concerns about my ability to handle pressure that nearly cost me recommendation letters for graduate school. Most disturbing were recent emails to Brian's parents before the wedding, suggesting I had unpredictable tendencies and it might be safer to limit my role in the ceremony. Brian looked stunned. My parents asked why you weren't more involved in the wedding. I told them what Amber had told me, that you'd chosen to take a smaller role because you were busy with work. I never said that, I whispered, the full scope of the manipulation overwhelming me. My mother, cornered by the evidence, finally abandoned her denials. You don't understand what it was like, she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. When Melissa was born, Richard was besotted with her. He had all these plans she would take over the business, follow in his footsteps. I barely existed! Then Amber came along, and it was the same story all over again. She wasn't interested in finance or business, so Richard barely noticed her. So you deliberately drove a wedge between me and Melissa? My father asked, his voice hollow. You manipulated our entire family for decades out of jealousy. I protected my relationship with my husband and made sure both my daughters had a place where they felt special. My mother insisted. Melissa had you. Richard, whenever you bothered to notice her. Amber had me. But Mom, I said, finding my voice, you didn't just make Amber feel special. You actively worked to make me feel worthless. The constant criticism, the belittling, telling me I was too sensitive whenever I tried to address it. That goes beyond balancing attention. Amber was staring at our mother, a new understanding dawning on her face. Is that why you always told me Melissa was jealous of me? That she resented my social success because she only had her books and career? You said she thought she was better than us. I never thought that, I said softly. I spent my entire life believing my family didn't want me around. That I was tolerated, not loved. That's ridiculous, my mother snapped, but her conviction was weakening. You were always so independent, so self-sufficient. Because I had to be, I shot back. Because every time I reached out for support or approval, you made me feel like a burden. A heavy silence fell over the room. The layers of deception and manipulation had created entirely separate realities for each member of our family. Finally, my father spoke, his voice steadier than I expected. This ends today. All of it. The lies, the manipulation, the financial impropriety, all of it. He turned to my mother. Catherine, I want you to leave this house. Tonight. I'll have my assistant arrange a hotel. I can't even look at you right now without wondering if anything about our marriage has been real. My mother's face drained of color. Richard, you can't mean that. Everything I did was for this family. No, he said firmly. Everything you did was to control this family. That's not the same thing. He turned to Amber. As for you, you have choices to make. We can report your actions to the authorities, or you can agree to the recovery plan Melissa has outlined, which includes mandatory addiction treatment, financial restitution, and therapy. Amber looked defeated. Like I have a choice. You always had choices. My father replied. And you chose poorly. Now you get to choose how you make amends. Brian, who had remained silent through most of the confrontation, finally spoke. I need time to think about whether our marriage has any future. But I want you to get help, Amber. Whether we stay together or not. My father turned to me last. Melissa, I can never undo the years of hurt you've experienced. I was blind, absorbed in my work, and I failed you as a father. I can only ask for the chance to try to make it right going forward. As the meeting continued into the night, we hammered out a plan for the company, for Amber's recovery, and for beginning the painful process of rebuilding our family on a foundation of truth rather than manipulation. It would be a long road, with no guarantee of success. As Aunt Rebecca drove me home well past midnight, she squeezed my hand. You know, when I saw you seated in that hallway at the wedding, I almost didn't say anything. I've been complicit in this too, by staying silent all these years. Sometimes the greatest courage isn't in making a grand gesture, but in simply walking away from a table where you're not valued, or a hallway, I said with a small smile. Or a hallway, she agreed. You did the right thing, Melissa. And in doing so, you may have saved this family from itself. I wasn't sure if the family could be saved, or even if it should be. But for the first time in my life, I knew my own worth wasn't dependent on their validation. That alone felt like victory. Over the next 3 months, our family underwent a transformation that would have seemed impossible before the wedding. Like a building with a cracked foundation, we had to tear down much of what existed before we could begin to rebuild something stronger. The first week was the hardest. My mother refused to leave the family home, insisting my father was overreacting. It took a detailed presentation of the financial evidence, plus the revelation that her manipulations constituted a form of emotional abuse, before she finally moved into a condo my father owned downtown. She cycled between tearful apologies and blistering accusations, sometimes in the same conversation. Amber entered a residential treatment program for gambling addiction in Arizona. Before she left, we had a private conversation in which she admitted how long Shed resented me. Mom always told me you had Dad wrapped around your finger, she said, picking at a loose thread on her sweater. That you were his obvious favorite, but that I was hers. It felt like a fair trade, until I realized Dad's approval was the only currency that really mattered in our family. I never had Dad's approval, I told her. I had his expectations. There's a difference. I see that now, she said softly. For what it's worth. I am sorry about the wedding. The hallway table was Mom's idea. She said it would keep you from causing a scene. Though the apology was inadequate given the years of mistreatment, it was a start. I reminded myself that recovery was a process, not an event for Amber, for my parents, and for me. 2 weeks after the family meeting, I began therapy with Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a specialist in family trauma. In our first session, she asked me a question no one had ever asked before. What do you want, Melissa? Not for the family business, not for your parents or sister, but for yourself. I sat in stunned silence, realizing I had spent so many years trying to earn my family's love that I had never seriously considered what I wanted independently of them. I don't know, I finally admitted. Isn't that pathetic? I'm 32 years old, and I don't know what I want. Dr. Chen smiled gently. Then that's where we'll start. Through weekly sessions, I began to untangle my self-worth from my family's validation. I explored interests I'd never allowed myself to pursue. From painting, I was terrible but enjoyed it anyway, to joining a hiking group where I made my first friends who knew nothing about my family drama. At work, I set clear boundaries, no longer accepting last-minute assignments that required weekend work. To my surprise, this earned me more respect, not less. Jonathan, my boss, even mentioned I was being considered for a director position. Your confidence has grown, he observed. It's noticeable in client meetings. The family business underwent its own transformation. My father hired a forensic accounting team to identify exactly how much money Amber had diverted and from which accounts. The total was staggering. $2.3 million over 18 months. Working with the company lawyers, we developed a plan to make the affected clients whole without alerting them to the embezzlement, thus avoiding potentially devastating publicity. My father insisted I join the company board of directors, where my expertise in risk management proved invaluable. At my first board meeting, he formally acknowledged my contributions to the firm's algorithmic trading systems, which had increased revenues by 22% over the previous year. This innovation, he told the board, was entirely Melissa's work. We're fortunate that she's agreed to license it to us despite past oversights and giving credit where it was due. The other board members, mostly my father's contemporaries who had barely acknowledged my existence at previous company functions, looked at me with new respect. One even approached me afterward about joining the board of his own tech company. My mother's journey was more complicated. After initially refusing therapy, claiming she had done nothing wrong but try to balance attention between 2 daughters, she finally agreed to counseling after my father made it a condition of any possible reconciliation. Her therapist diagnosed her with narcissistic tendencies and a deep-seated insecurity that had led her to view her own daughters as competition rather than as individuals to nurture. Progress was slow and inconsistent. Some days, she seemed genuinely remorseful. Other days, she fell back into blame and manipulation. I maintained careful boundaries, agreeing to see her only in family therapy sessions with Dr. Chen present. During one particularly difficult session, my mother broke down completely. I was so afraid of being invisible, she sobbed. Your father was building his empire, and you were his clear successor. Where did that leave me? Where did it leave Amber? I thought I was creating balance, but I see now I was just creating division to make myself essential. It wasn't enough to erase decades of hurt, but it was the first time I'd seen her take genuine responsibility without immediately following it with a justification. Brian filed for an annulment rather than a divorce, citing fraud. She wasn't the person I thought I was marrying, he told me during a surprisingly cordial lunch. I can't stay married to someone I don't trust, no matter what treatment she's undergoing. Despite the circumstances, Brian and I developed an unexpected friendship. He had been deceived by my mother and Amber almost as thoroughly as I had been, and we found common ground in our shared experience of manipulation. "You know," he said during one of our conversations, "I always wondered why Amber spoke so negatively about you when everything I observed showed you to be kind and competent. Now I understand she was just repeating what she'd been told her entire life." By the 3-month mark, we had established a new normal that, while far from perfect, was at least based in reality rather than deception. The company was stabilized, with new controls in place to prevent any similar financial impropriety. Amber was making progress in treatment, focusing not just on her gambling addiction but on the family dynamics that had shaped her choices. My parents were living separately but communicating more honestly than they had in decades. As for me, I had reached a crossroads. My father wanted me to take a larger role in the family business, potentially as chief risk officer with a path to eventual succession. It was the validation I had sought for years, finally being offered freely. Yet I found myself hesitating. "What's holding you back?" Dr. Chen asked during a session. I considered the question carefully. I think I want to succeed or fail on my own terms, not as an extension of my father or the family name. For so long, I tried to prove myself worthy of inclusion in a family that didn't want me. Now, I'm not sure I want to be included in the way they're offering. "That's a powerful realization," she observed. "So what will you do instead?" I smiled, feeling a newfound clarity. I've been offered a position with a sustainable investment firm in Colorado. They focus on ethical funding for environmental initiatives, something I've always been passionate about but never pursued because it didn't align with my father's vision. "And have you made a decision?" "I think I just did." I replied, "I need to build a life that isn't defined by trying to heal old wounds or win old battles. Maybe that means stepping away from the family business. At least for now." When I told my father my decision the following day, I braced for disappointment or anger. Instead, he surprised me. "If anyone understands the need to build something of your own, it's me," he said. "I just wish I had recognized your need to do the same years ago, instead of trying to force you into the role I imagined for you." He reached across his desk and took my hand, a gesture so uncharacteristic I almost pulled away in shock. "Just promise me one thing, Melissa. Don't disappear from our lives. We're trying to build something new as a family, too, and we need you to be part of that, however you choose to define your role." As I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The path ahead wasn't entirely clear, but for the first time, it was truly mine to choose. 6 months after what our family now referred to simply as the wedding. "Hello. I'm delighted to assist you with our voice services. Choose a voice that resonates with you, and let's begin our creative audio journey together." The firm specialized in environmental and social governance investments, allowing me to blend my financial expertise with my personal values in a way my father's more traditional firm never could. "Melissa Thompson," I answered. "Miss Thompson, there's a delivery for you in reception," the office manager informed me. Downstairs, I found a large arrangement of native Colorado wildflowers. The card read, "Proud of you always. May your new mountains bring perspective to match your talent. Love, Dad." The simple message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. My relationship with my father had evolved more in 6 months than in the previous 30 years. Free from my mother's interference and his own blind spots, we were finally building a connection based on mutual respect rather than expectations and disappointments. The family business had stabilized under new management structures that included external board members for the first time in its history. My father remained CEO, but had brought in a respected industry veteran as president to handle day-to-day operations, allowing him to focus on repairing his personal life. My mother had made uneven but genuine progress in therapy. After initially refusing to accept responsibility for her manipulations, a breakthrough session where she listened to recordings of her contradictory instructions to Amber and me over the years had cracked her denial. She still struggled with narcissistic tendencies, but she was learning to recognize and interrupt her controlling behaviors. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she had said during our last family therapy session before my move. "But I hope someday you might be open to building something new." I had responded honestly, "Forgiveness isn't the issue, Mom. Trust is. And trust has to be earned over time." Amber had completed her 90-day residential treatment program for gambling addiction and had transitioned to intensive outpatient therapy while living in a supervised recovery housing program. The annulment of her marriage to Brian had been finalized, a painful but necessary step in her recovery process. To everyone's surprise, Amber had chosen not to return to the family business. Instead, she was taking courses in addiction counseling at a local community college. "I spent so many years trying to be what everyone else wanted," she told me during one of our now monthly video calls. "I think it's time I figure out who I actually am." Though our relationship remained fragile, there was a new authenticity to our interactions. Without our mother's triangulation and with the clarity that comes from intensive therapy, we were slowly discovering we had more in common than we'd been led to believe. That evening, as I arranged the wildflowers in my apartment, my phone rang. It was Jessica, my cousin, calling about the upcoming Thanksgiving holiday. "So we're hosting this year," she said without preamble. "Everyone's coming. Your parents, Amber, Aunt Rebecca, the whole crew. I know it's a lot to ask with your new job, but we'd really love to have you here." I hesitated. Family gatherings still triggered anxiety, despite all the progress we'd made. "Before you answer," Jessica continued, sensing my hesitation, "I want you to know that I've already told everyone that there will be firm boundaries. No manipulation, no guilt trips, and absolutely no hallway seating." I laughed, despite myself. "You're never going to let anyone forget that, are you?" "Never," she confirmed cheerfully. "Sometimes people need a concrete reminder of what not to do. So, will you come? You can stay with us rather than at your parents' if that's easier." I considered the invitation. 6 months ago, a family Thanksgiving would have been an exercise in invisibility and hurt feelings. Now, it represented something different, not perfection, but possibility. "I'll come," I decided. But in bringing my new friend Michael. I had been dating a fellow hiking group member for about a month, my first relationship that wasn't shadowed by family drama. "Excellent. We can't wait to meet him." Jessica paused before adding more seriously, "You know, Mel, what you did at the wedding, walking away from that table. It changed everything. Not just for you, but for all of us. It forced us to see the dynamics we'd all been enabling for years." After we hung up, I walked to my balcony and looked out at the mountains, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. The hallway table that was meant to diminish me had instead become the catalyst for my liberation. By walking away from a situation where I wasn't valued, I had opened the door to a life where I could thrive on my own terms. The following weekend, I helped organize my cousin Rachel's engagement party. When the event planner asked about seating arrangements, I smiled and said, "Just make sure everyone has a place at the main table. No exceptions." The wedding that had begun with humiliation had ultimately led to transformation not just for me, but for our entire family. We were learning, sometimes awkwardly, how to relate to each other with honesty instead of manipulation, with boundaries instead of barriers. As I finished settling into my new home that night, I reflected on how sometimes the strongest action isn't making a grand gesture, but simply refusing to accept less than you deserve. My quiet exit from a hallway table had spoken volumes, creating ripples that would continue to shape our family for years to come. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from a situation where you weren't valued in order to find your true worth? Or stayed too long hoping things would change? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply walk away. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember you always deserve a seat at the main table, not in the hallway of someone else's life.